Hey everyone, it's Sai, and today I'm going to bring you 3 color correction tips that can help improve the look of your footage, improve your color correction process, and tell a better story overall. So, let's get started. So before we start, I wanted to preface this by saying that you should always and absolutely attempt to get the best possible footage with your camera before you get to post-production. Doesn't matter if you're a GoPro user, DSLR user, mirrorless camera user, or if you have a high production studio camera. The rule is still the same. Get the best possible footage before you get to the computer. The better the footage you get out there, the better your post-production process will be here. Okay, so let's get started. So with the first tip, we're going to be creating color contrast with curves. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to go to the color tab right up here. Mine's already open. And then what I like to do is always pull up Lumetri scopes just so I can see the light darkness level and the color levels of the clip. I just like to have them open while I'm color grading. If you don't have that open in your color tab, you can go up to Window right up here and toggle Lumetri scopes right there. To get the 2 scopes that I have showing right now, you can go to the wrench right down here and see the vector scope and the waveform. So you can see that we need to just lower the darkness or the black level there to 0. So now we have a perfectly dark to light grade of the clip. I'm not going to mess around with the color temperature right here, but you can do your white balance with an eyedropper as well. There's plenty of tutorials explaining that. So to go to curves, you're going to go down right here in your Lumetri color panel, and you've got your curve bar or chart. So this is basically what we're going to be using for the next 5 clips. So I've taken some well-shot clips like this one's alright. This one's not great, it's completely blown out. It's pretty shady here. And then this one, which is one of my favorites, but we got some exposure over here that could be a problem. So I wanted to include a wide variety of clips from kind of good to kind of not so great, and making the not so great clips usable by using these color grading techniques. So let's get started. So with this one, we're just going to take the shadows of the curve and just kind of pull them down. And you can definitely see, you can get a lot of range on this. So we'll just scale that back. And that's nice. So that kind of takes the shadows and just darkens them and darkens the kind of lines in the footage. So that looks nice. And then right up here, we're going to take the highlights and kind of boost them up to this perfect yin-yang shape, and then your midtones are kind of right here. They don't really change. So already in the 5 seconds that took, you've got some good contrast, and that's really nice. So this one was taken in the morning. It was quite sunny, even though we were in the forest. So that's very advantageous because I can really drag down the shadows quite a bit, and you could still, you could get a really high contrast shot if you really wanted to, if that's your thing. For me, that's a little bit too much. Even that's pretty nice. Let's go right there. And that just creates a nice dynamic full image, a full clip. You got the dark greens, the medium greens, and then the light greens. So that's one of the bonuses of kind of shooting slightly overexposed. Some people, and sometimes I do this myself, they purposely shoot maybe 1 to 2 stops higher than they would normally shoot to kind of be able to take advantage of the wider curve capability. Moving on, we've got this lovely shot of the mountains, but it was pretty dark and kind of hazy during the morning, but we've still got the morning light still piercing through the clouds. So this is actually a kind of a hard shot to grade. It wasn't well shot by myself. If I was judging myself, it was pretty underexposed, but let's see what we can do. And as you can see, you can't really use curves that well here. You can get a little bit of the yin yang, and and you'll see the contrast there that changed. But we don't want to go much more down on the shadows because it's too dark. So we're going to go back, and I'm going to show you how to kind of make this image a bit more usable and fix this in the coming tips. So the fourth image, so this image is, I mean, by itself it's not great. I mean, the sky is completely blown out, the shadows here are pretty dark, so in terms of color contrast, you've got a lot of things going against you to try to kind of create it a usable clip that helps tell your story, but let's give it a shot. So we're gonna take the shadows down, bump up those highlights even more. It kind of seems weird, but we're gonna do that, and we're just gonna leave it right there. We've created some nice contrast in the shadows, and we're gonna use some masks in the later tips to kind of bring out these shadows and to kind of bring out these tones, while also kind of putting a little haze or damper on the sky to kind of make this clip usable. Will it be great? Probably not, but I think it will be usable, so let's keep going. So for the fifth clip, we've got beautiful Scottish mountains. I'm gonna pull the curves down, or the shadows I mean, pull the highlights up. And yeah, you can see it bringing out the nice yellows and oranges in the grass and just the textures in the mountains. Might have overdone it just a bit, so we're gonna just kind of scale it back. Little problem area up here, but I think we can make that look a little bit better. So yeah, that was tip number one. Okay, so for tip number two, what I want to do is emphasize the nicer colors and tones in my footage and also reduce the not so nice ones. As you can see, we have the 5 clips from tip number one. We're going to continue using them and editing them. And I'm in the editing panel. I would like to create an adjustment layer. Yep. You're going to take this adjustment layer over here and throw it over a clip. Next, we're going to go back to the color panel, and we're going to go back to curves, and you're going to go to the hue versus sat graph. Then you're going to go to the eyedropper, and let's isolate, oh, it's thinking. Maybe it's not thinking. Let's isolate red. It's given you 3 dots, and you're going to take the middle dot, and as you can see, you can increase and decrease the saturation pretty easily. I want it to pop, so I'm going to leave it maybe right about there. What I also like to do is I like to add 2 more dots right next to them and take these middle ones now and sort of bring them up as well for a more gradual tonality shift. Nice. Next, let's take out these, well, not take out, but emphasize these yellows. And bring them up. That's nice and maybe a little bit too much. There. As you can see, with those 2 changes, we've brought out the reds, yellows, and oranges right over here. And this probably changed a little bit too. This creates a nice visual focal area, starting from maybe right around here, or right around here, maybe going here, which basically follows the path of the stream. So that's a nice focal point to me. Something that I like to do on a lot of my clips is I also like to isolate purple. So let's just create 3 points with purple in the middle and drag that down. So our cameras, when they capture footage, they also capture a lot of noisy artifacts or maybe grain, and a lot of the noise and artifacts hides out in the purple area of our color wheel from our cameras. So just a tip right there. I like to isolate purple. It just kind of cleans up your footage, especially on the final export. You might not necessarily see it right here, but trust me, it does help out a lot in the final export in terms of just cleaning up your video. So let's just leave it right there. And well, look at that. I think that looks a bit better from where we last left it. It's subtle, but it's effective. And then I might change the blue just a smidge. Oh, that pulled up red. Don't want that. I might drop this blue ever so slightly. Cool. Now moving on to the next one. So we've got greens here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find a green, a middle tone of green, and I'm just going to bump that up so slightly. Here I feel like you could really overdo it, so let's just go right there. Push up the yellows, push that up. And I'm gonna isolate this kind of purpley color. Well, that's red, so I'm gonna kind of knock that down just a bit. And then I'm gonna manually isolate purple once again. And I think that's all I'm gonna really do here. Sometimes you don't have to do much. Okay, for this third clip, so this one's interesting. Doesn't really look like there's much you can do, but there are a few things that we can do. We've got some yellow. Besides white, yellow I think is the second strongest tone here. So I'm gonna add a fourth one here and just kind of bring up these yellows and oranges, as you can see. Just make that a bit more prominent. And for this darker underexposed image, I'm gonna have to really bring up these dots a bit higher. And I'm gonna see what the clouds offer us. A lot of this is just kind of trial and error, you know, clicking the eyedropper and kind of just seeing what colors you're gonna get, just kind of adjusting. So the original color has a bit of blue, but if you want it to be sort of a true gray that you see in a lot of morning fog and clouds, you're gonna just kind of drop that a bit, like so. All right, moving on. Clip number 4. So this one's tricky as well. We've got a lot of our colors hiding in shadow. So let's just see what we get. Red, orange, and some yellow. So like the last one, I'm just going to bring these up quite a bit to emphasize those tones. And I might adjust these in the third tip, but for now, looks pretty good. Doesn't change too much. And let's check out the clouds. A little bit of blue. I might keep that just because this is so overexposed that if you drop it down to gray, then it looks completely just white. And we need as much detail up there, so let's just leave that. Let's reduce some purple. Okay. I think I forgot to reduce purple here. Let's do that real quick too. All right, last but not least, let's definitely bring out these oranges and yellows. It's just so pretty. And here, since it's more overexposed, you don't have to bring these as high, because if you go where I went in the last 2 clips, that's too much. I'm gonna bring up red just a smidge. So this one you kind of have to be careful when reducing purple, because there's some purple back here, it looks like. So let's just see what happens. Well, actually not too much. So let's just leave that there. Let's check out the rocks. They look a little bit blue to me, and I want them to be a bit more gray, so I'm gonna take these down. That also reduces some of the blue up here, but that doesn't bother me. And I think this one is pretty much all set. So that's tip number 2. where you're basically emphasizing the nicer tones of your clip and reducing the not so nice tones of your clip. It's a great way to kind of further finesse your footage and bring out, the nice parts of what you're shooting. So highly recommend you using it in conjunction with curves. It just creates a higher and more dynamic color contrast in your overall quality of footage. So for tip number 3, what I want to show you how to use is adjustment layer masks. You can use these to kind of help fix the blown out sky, maybe emphasize the stream area, and basically create even more an additional further color contrast to kind of add more visual interest to your footage. So what I have over here are the original 5 clips from that video that I spent a lot more time color correcting. And then I have the clips that we've been color correcting so far. And I apologize, I forgot in tip number 2 to continue using adjustment layers for the last 4. But basically the reason for that is I like to isolate these layers so you can kind of tell exactly what effect you're using quickly so it doesn't get confusing. Because if you throw them all on one area, it can kind of get a little chaotic. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to go back to editing and you're going to grab another adjustment layer. And then you can copy this throughout. And then what I like to do is I also like to maybe make a second line of layers because you never know how much you might need. So that should be good. Going back to color, so we're going to start on the second one since our first one has this color correction on it. So you're going to go to the second one, as I said, then you're going to go up to effect controls, and then you're going to go to where it says opacity. So let's try to bring back this sky. So I'm going to click the square and you'll see this blue box over here. You're going to click it and kind of move it over here. And then I'm going to take this corner pin and drag it all the way across the screen. And then I'm going to make another point and drag it over here, basically covering the entire sky. And then I might make a few more points to kind of loosely follow the horizon line. It doesn't have to be perfect. So this is probably pretty good. Oops. And there you go. We've loosely outlined the sky. So then you're going to go back to, what am I going to say? Curves. So you're going to add a little bit of more shadow into it. And as you can see, there is some detail here. My camera captured some detail, it's just not showing up. So that's obviously too much. We're gonna go back, but then we're gonna bring it down just a little bit. And then we're gonna go to basic correction, and then we're gonna kind of bring these highlights in. And then we're also gonna turn down the exposure just a smidge. And as you can see, there is actually quite a bit of detail. But we also want it to look realistic, so the most you could probably do is just maybe negative 0.3, looks good. And then it's pretty unnaturally blue, so we're gonna go back to curves, use our trusty eyedropper, and try to find that kind of unnatural candy blue. Nope. Maybe over here. There we go. And then we're just going to drop that down to kind of reduce that tone. Is there another one? Sometimes it's tricky to find that color, so you can just add a few more points and then there we go. Make that more of a subtle blue. And since we're in the mask, you're not affecting the other blues anywhere else. And then I might add a little bit of contrast here and go back to curves and pump that up just a smidge. So now these look like puffy white clouds with a little bit of blue. And then last but not least, I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna feather this harsh line out. Let's do 400. And there you go. We have made the sky look a lot better from that to that. And then to compare, we've got that, where I've left a little bit of blue in here, but I think either could pass, to be honest with you. Okay, next, let's emphasize this stream area. So instead of a square, let's use a circle. Oops. Autosave. So let's use a circle. I'm going to use my top level adjustment layer since it's empty, and I'm going to go to the circle. It's already up here. I'm just going to drag these keyframes down and sort of loosely outline the nice kind of pretty parts. So I want to grab the yellow, the orange, maybe a little bit of the creek bed in the distance. And then what I'm going to do, instead of dragging curves down or dragging the shadows of curves down, I'm going to pull these up just ever so slightly to make them sort of pop. And then I'm going to turn down these highlights just a bit. Let's see. And then this becomes just more or less kind of experimenting with what you like or what you like to see, so you can make it a bit darker, a bit brighter. I might go just a smidge brighter, because you can see the striation between the mask and not the mask, so it's important to make sure you still stay within the realm of reality. See if this does something fun. No, mutes it. Maybe you want it a little bit down. And then we're going to take the eyedropper tool and push these yellows up even a little bit more. So you've basically stacked two effects onto each other now. And the more effects that you stack, the more you can kind of isolate or reduce what you want to show in your footage. So I'm just going to do that just ever so slightly. I may take out a little bit of the blue to make it more of that realistic watery gray-ish, like that. And then you're going to feather the kind of hard edge. So 400, and there you go. So from that to that to, oops, there's nothing there, I don't think. Oh, there's the color correction there. So yeah, it's kind of hard to lose track, as I mentioned before, so having these adjustment layers at least definitely helps me out. So, and then this is our original clip with the first curve adjustment applied. And if we delete that, just to show you from where we went from there, unedited, to that, turn these all on, oops, you've got a nicely graded and color corrected image. And then to compare it to my final version, where I up the colors even more, you can have a lot of different takes of how to do color. I think in this one, I up the saturation a little bit more here. So if we go over here, you get more of that effect where it increases the overall saturation. So it's always comes down to personal preference. Now that I look at this one, I might like this one a little bit better. It looks a little bit more realistic, where I might have pumped the colors a little bit too much over here. So it's kind of like painting a painting, where if you paint something and you like it and then you step maybe 10 steps back from it, looks completely different. So moving on to the next 4 clips, I'm not gonna draw all these masks, but I'm gonna show you what I did over here. So for the forest, I used this mask right here to essentially turn down the highlights. Basically, the trees are kind of getting blown out. So it's just a minor adjustment, but it does make a difference. For this one, it's going from that to this. So I think this one changed pretty dramatically. So we've got this top level mask that I drew to basically bring in the detail of these highlights. So you see more cloud, and I took down the highlights there, slightly took down the exposure, did nothing with curves, but if you wanted to, you could bring them further down. And then I think this top layer over here, so this layer I used to kind of bring out the trees in the forest. So originally it was dark, but we just kind of brightened it up a little bit, which makes a huge difference. And I took down the blues and I added some more red, even though it's overall a green image. It just brings out those tones. And overall makes this kind of darker, underexposed image a bit more bright and usable. Going over here, we've got what was originally, that, which I would think is pretty harsh to use, to that. It's by no means perfect, but we've definitely regained a lot of the sky, and the foreground is much more nice to look at. So let's check out the masks. Pretty straightforward, rectangular mask. Bottom mask, I greatly increased the shadows using curves, did nothing else. And up here, brought the shadows down slightly, turned down all the highlights, turned down the exposure, and you got some more detail by doing that. And over here, I'll show you what it looks like before. That's already pretty good looking, but the sky is kind of a problem. So the first mask, I think, addresses the sky. Yep. So I took down the exposure, turned down the highlights, took out purple even more, and you could also do curves, but it gets to a point where that looks wonky. So that's the best you could do, but I do think it's a dramatic improvement from that. Creates more of a moody atmosphere. And then up here, I just emphasized the foreground just a smidge more. And then something else that you could do while you're here is scroll all the way down to vignette. And you can just throw a little bit of black vignette on your mask, so it only affects this one corner of the mask. Then by doing that, you have a dark to light sort of visual range. So that's just a little tip that sometimes I throw on some of my clips. And that's about it. Those are 3 tips that you can use to help color contrast, and they're a main staple of my color correcting process. It's very flexible. You don't have to use any additional LUTs, no additional plugins, so it keeps Premiere Pro running light, which is always important, and I hope at least one of these tips helps you out. Could it be? It's bonus tip time. So you might have noticed in my previous 3 tips that we have an adjustment layer above all of my footage. So what I use this for is where I store some at mass color corrections. I've reduced the purple, I've turned down the shadows, I've done some other corrections, and I keep this layer locked. The reason for that is so that I don't have to basically do those adjustments on each individual clip, as that would be time consuming. And this is just a quick way to save a few minutes. So yeah, that's your quick bonus tip. So those are 3 tips that you can incorporate into your video projects right now. I hope at least one of them helps you out. And as I've mentioned before, color correction is paramount to being able to tell a good story. And it makes a good story a great story. So don't forget about it, don't neglect it, learn it if you have to. Trust me, it's worth it. If you've liked this video today, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps me out and it allows me to bring you more videos such as this and the other nature and hiking ones. So it would really mean a lot to me, and I'll see you guys next time.